Tinfoil hat. Oh, what the fuck are you guys even talking about?
Global controls will have to be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them.
Welcome to Tinfoil Hat. We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
Good morning, Swarm, and welcome to Tinfoil Hat. You know I am. You know I'm here to do. I'm here to rock. Joining me as always in his new cool apartment. Look at that. What are you, the Jeffersons? What are you, moving on up, bro? Seriously, look at that, dude.
He's even got a refrigerator.
A refrigerator. No more.
Not even like one of those little ones. Not
guy.
one of those little ones. You know, the little wine cooler thing.
With wheels on them. Please welcome Xavier Guerrero.
What's up? What's up? How's it going?
Going good. Thank you for asking, Xavier Guerrero. And living in with some weird shit behind him, living in the forest with the ghost of George Bush just flashing behind him. Jay Nice, Johnny Woodard. How are you?
Pretty good, man. I'm out in the country now. I just froze my tits off in Chicago and Indiana with Jason. That was a mess. I mean, it was just so cold, dude. I went there to play golf, and it was like the coldest week they've had so far this year.
Where does he live?
He's in kind of, I don't know what you'd say, like North Indiana, somewhere like that. I was in Michigan in the middle of the woods, which was nice. So
you thought it would be good to go to the Midwest in November to golf?
Well, it had just been like 60 degrees last week, and we were like, oh, this is great. The weather looked like it was going to be clear. But no, I also went to see Jeff Richards' show. That was pretty cool, seeing him. I've never really seen him do straight stand-up. I've only ever seen like Ditto Kiddo and all that stuff, which I really like. So it was.
How was the show?
It was great. Jason did really well. His mother kind of got in his ass about doing some new material. His mom was like, you do the same jokes like 10 years. And so he got offended and did a bunch of new stuff. And it actually went wonderfully, really well.
Jason could be the greatest. Guys,
Yes.
Speaking of shows, a couple things going on here. I will be in San Diego with the Cash Daddies, December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Guess what? They're giving away a bunch of free tickets to the show because apparently Tim Dillon canceled, and they thought, hey, let's put Sam in there. That's the same brand. Not really, but I guess somebody's weird thought. So if you want to see Cash Daddies, this will be the last time in my life you will ever see me for free. Ever. I will never do it. You will never see me again. If anyone ever does that, like in LA, maybe, but on the road, this will never happen again. So come, be prepared to buy some shirts, some stickers, and support the guys. But come enjoy, because this is going to be a really fun show. American Comedy Company is a wonderful comedy club. It's a great place to see everybody. Go check that out. And then December 11th, I am live at Side Splitters in Tampa. So I'm going to my favorite cities, back-to-back jacks. This 2022, my new tour is coming, and it's called The Hammer of the Gods. And I'm already putting together some insane dates. So it's going to be a great time. I'm going everywhere, dude. I'm going everywhere. So I'm very excited. You just go to samtripoli.com for all your ticketing needs. Rockfin is on fire. ROKFIN.com/tinfoil hat. 0. Broken Sim. We don't smoke the same. Conspiracy Social Club. Any of those. Support any of those, man. And you get all that content for free. Go check it out. New t-shirt alert. Was it on last time when we said it? Look at that.
Yeah.
Well, not only just the Raider shirt, but the Anti-Vax Vaccine Club is available. And man, it's flying off the shelves. Grab that while you can. Go grab that. Go to samtripoli.com. Go down to tinfoilhattshirts.com. They'll click the link. It will take you right there. It's a great way to support the show. Anything else, guys?
Yeah.
Go on.
We just dropped Broken Sam. We talk Tim Dillon versus Michael Che. We talk about Sam crop dusting people on an airliner. And also shouts to there were a lot of tinfoil fans in Indiana at that show, especially, which is, I mean, had nothing to do with tinfoil. And some guy, literally the guy sitting next to me, just turns to me and goes, "Hey, dude, he heard me talking, you know?" And he recognized my voice. He's like, "What's your name, man?" And then like the whole table was listening to tinfoil. And then some other dude comes walking over, like really nervous. And I was like, "Hey,
was
bro."
that weird?
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah. It was cool. So they were all really cool, though. I to be clear, it was.
Well, the Swarm are cuddlers, bro. Never forget the Swarm.
And they all have like they're in like stable relationships. It's really surprising.
So
if you want to meet any more Swarms, we have a live. We don't smoke the same this Saturday. Yes, Saturday after Thanksgiving, and El Monte at a pizza place. It's a couple VIP tickets. It will be worth it. We'll have little supplements, if you know what I mean. So buy the VIP boxes, but there's a couple tickets left at eventbrite.com or go to my XG Marks the Spot.
So is there? So they got to go to what, your Twitter or your Instagram?
They got to go to eventbrite.com and tell you we don't Thanksgiving the same, or just DM me and I'll send you to the right place.
You should put that, like, pin it onto your Twitter or your Instagram so people could find it. Simple. Okay. Yeah, go check that all out. A lot of free shows for you. Zero, Tinfoil Hat, Broken Sim, Conspiracy Social Club, Punch Drunk Sports, Union of the Unwanted. If you want to find any, again, go to samtripoli.com. All you have to do is touch the screen and go down, and there's just banners. Click it. It will take you right to the RSS feed. So enjoy the power of all of us. I love you very much. And anything else, guys?
Go.
We have a great show for you. Please enjoy it, and also have a great
We go
Thanksgiving.
deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere.
Okay, let's get into it. Very excited to have this next guest on. He's got a very interesting take on using fiction, nonfiction to describe kind of what's going on in the world. Please welcome my good friend and soon to be yours, Travis Mattier. How are you, brother?
Oh, I am so excited to be here. This is a huge opportunity for me, a virtual unknown, I think. No one's really heard of me outside of Missoula, Montana.
Don't talk about XG like that.
Oh, man, no. I have a poem actually for you guys that I want to get to at some point, but
this is great. I'm in. I'm all about that action. I'm all about
I wrote a poem this morning for all three of you guys because I was out walking my dog by a river, and this is something that Mark Steves and I talked about on his podcast, My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, because I like to find the people that their families think they're crazy, because that certainly fits my bill. But I wrote a poem for you guys if you guys want to start out that way, possibly. I am a poet. I went to the University of Montana, so this is my skill set.
Does Montana have a big poetry scene?
Yeah, the MFA program used to be very well known, kind of up there with the Iowa's workshop. So we used to be cool before Seth Bodner, the president, is doing a controlled demolition of the humanities. But, you know, hey, it's what's happening.
It's very interesting, dude. I could see a bunch of cowboys doing slam poetry.
Cowboy poetry is fantastic. The program was started by Richard Hugo, this poet back in the 60s, poor guy from Seattle. So really interesting dude, actually, amazing writer from back in the day.
All right, man, I'm all about this. And then then we'll get into you tell
it's a short
a little
poem.
bit more about you. Okay,
it's a short poem. Okay. Tripoli has triple threat, not goofball combo with crystal meth, but solid wood and burning trees with white guy Johnny and Mex XG. Now hear me from a town on Zoom. I got the cron, but no more room for bullshit lips that smack and plot, inverting words to gaslight thought. The seeds are sentient. We don't fear blood when tapping memory from before the flood. So thank you, because this shit's profound. And Sam, I love your knuckle sound.
Dude, that was excellent.
You like that?
That was wonderful. Thank you very much
awesome.
for that. That was great. I didn't know what to expect.
Max
You blew my
XG.
expectations
That's
out.
my favorite part. Max
Well,
XG.
You guys had helped inspire me, and so I'm very excited to share my perspective with you guys today.
So you do poetry. You know, we talked a little bit before. You do a lot of boots on the ground, helping people and stuff like that. I mean, outside of poetry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I was born in Spokane, Washington in 78. So I'm 43 years old, and I moved to Missoula in the year 2000 with my fiance, who's now my wife. So I've lived here for 21 years. I went to the University of Montana, graduated in 2003. Tried to be a serious writer, worked in the service industry, though. I worked in a restaurant for like 3 or 4 years. And then, I was a progressive. I was a liberal. I started working at a homeless shelter in 2008 as an AmeriCorps Vista. It's like a government funded program. I teared up when Barack Obama came to speak at the Adams Center here in Missoula, tears in my eyes. And then I proceeded to be disillusioned over the next 10 years working in the nonprofit sector. So I worked directly with homeless individuals, chronic homeless individuals. So like the hardcore chronic alcoholics, meth users, kind of that entire spectrum of mental health and addiction issues. And I burned myself out 7 years at the shelter, took some time off, worked at an area agency on aging in a call center. And then I wrote a poem, and the poem was published in our local newspaper, and a city councilwoman by the name of Gwen Jones really didn't like it. And she violated my First Amendment rights by using her board member position to take me away from my paid work duties. And she had my poem cut out from the newspaper and was like cussing at me. And I ended up walking out. It was a big old problem that the HR had to deal with. But she gave me a letter so I didn't sue the organization, and she signed it. And I decided to leave my job at the nonprofit in January 3rd, 2020. To really focus on content creation full time, both as a citizen journalist and as an artist. And so my hope and plan was to do a lot of in-person performances, and then like a pandemic happened and just like turned everything upside down. And I was like, oh shit, I better think of some other stuff to do. So I had to get more proficient with technology. I don't like technology, but I started a podcast January 5th, 2020, called Zoom Town originally, but now it's called Zoom Cron. And if I can't find people like Michael Wan willing to talk to me, I'll pay him to be a synchromistic for me, and then I'll get him and interview him eventually, because I'll find any way to try and talk about some of the stuff going on.
Believe, brother. Believe. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I think you're going to get him on. A lot to unpack here. To unpack.
I actually have talked to Michael Wan. Michael is who connected me to Mark Steves, who now got me here. So I've talked to Michael Wan. Amazing.
Wonderful. He's wonderful. His girlfriend is wonderful. They're a great power couple of truth. I really enjoy talking to both of them, and I look forward to talking to them into the future. Guys, I want to tell you about our friends at True Niagen. Okay, listen, some days, it's a real struggle, for sure. The good news, though, it's a lot less of those days ever since I found True Niagen. I love it. True Niagen helps fuel cell energy engines. And trust me, my engine needs some fueling, okay? Maintains cellular metabolism and even supports heart health. In a combination with healthy lifestyle with 13 published human clinical studies and backed by Nobel Prize winners. Dude, there's a bunch of Nobel Prize winners just shredding it out right there, right? Just getting, why can't I, imagine if I had a Nobel Peace Prize and I were shredded. I get all the ladies, okay?
All of them.
All of them. True Niagen is a supplement that's clinically proven to boost NAD levels, okay? The essentially coenzym, COENZYME, how do you say that? Coenzym. Coenzyme, okay, coenzyme, I like that. Required for cellular energy repair. Since taking True Niagen, I have more resilience, and it helps my muscle recovery, okay? I have more zest for life and more vitality. You want to add more vitality to your life? With True Niagen, okay? Right now, new customers can save 10% on their first purchase by going to trueniagen.com/tinfoil. Use the code tinfoil. That's TRUNIAGEN.com/tinfoil, code tinfoil to save 10% on your first purchase. That's trueniagen.com/tinfoil, code tinfoil. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. So much to unpack. I think I'm going to start with the letter first. Or does the letter deal with the homelessness?
The letter.
You said you wrote a poem that got into the newspaper, and it pissed some people off. It pissed this one lady off.
Let's get into like the homelessness, because I know I've heard this come up on a topic in the past on your guys' shows.
Okay.
I know some other. It's a really interesting area that a lot of people don't know a lot about. And books like Michael Schellenberger's San Francisco is really in the news now and kind of getting headlines. He was on Joe Rogan. He is one of these insider kind of service providers that's now blowing the whistle on the fact that we are in this insane situation. But back in 2008, just at the beginning of the housing crisis, I had no idea about any of this. I didn't know what credit default swaps were and why that mattered at a sort of micro level in our little nice mountain town. But I started understanding the systems in place to try and get people help. But the kind of help that can sometimes come can actually put ceilings on what you can achieve and limit you. So for one example, there was a single father who was working in a lighting store, and he was offered a raise, and the raise took him just above the limit that would drop him significantly in food assistance. And so he actually had to tell his boss, hey, I'm sorry, I can't afford this raise. It actually doesn't, balance out for what I'm getting to feed my kids. And so navigating the systems became a kind of fascination for me. I have a story. I was the homeless outreach coordinator for a long time. And so part of my deal was working with the public, trying to get college students to not give money to homeless people, because I actually had these anecdotal stories from the ground that would sort of drive home the point. And like one of the stories I would oftentimes say, I sat down with this homeless guy I knew pretty well for about 3 or 4 hours one Friday night. And so when these college kids would be looking at me for my insights and my expertise, I would say, hey, kids, you see this old decrepit guy, he's sitting on the sidewalk and you want to throw money at him. It's Friday night. You're feeling good and drunk. I'm like, I sat next to this guy for 3 hours one night. Someone gave him a $20 bill. Someone gave him $4. Someone bought him food and brought him nachos. A young woman showed her tits. I'm like, oh, wow, this is like entertainment. This is food. This is money. And then I was like, hey, kids, what you don't see is that dude takes that money and he sends it with the young native guy that's going to go get that pint of vodka. The vodka is communal. Everyone takes a drink. The young native is going to get drunk enough to go beat up other homeless people on the river trail later that night. No one's going to care about that because the violence is just among the homeless population. Who gives a fuck, right? And then that old guy is going to be like waiting at the liquor store at 8 o'clock in the morning so that he doesn't go into a seizure, and bring the EMTs and the medics at thousands of dollars an hour to take him to the ER. And so I have all of these anecdotal stories that I would use to try and change behavior. But the systems are so fucked, I just got burned out.
So that's a very interesting thing, because I do give away a lot of money to the homeless. And I've been taught it by a gentleman I had on here, and it was kind of this model of abundance. That wasn't his saying. I got that from another guest. But the mob abundance is like, give it away, right? Give it away. And my question, it is like, so if I give this guy $20, right? Let's say normally someone will give anywhere from a couple bucks, $5, and I give it to them. And then they go use it to use drugs. Am I helping or am I hurting the situation? And I often sit there, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, because I'm really into, okay, let me just finish this out and I'll get into what I'm really into when I discuss homeless. But am I helping or hurting this guy? And for me, and I'd love to hear anybody else's opinion on this, that's not part of my equation, whether I'm helping or hurting this person. I don't know what this person's going to do with this $5. If this person uses this act of kindness and uses it to just continue the patterns that he's in, I can't change that. And for that moment, maybe that's what that gentleman needs. You talk about, he's going to have a seizure and stuff like that. And, no, this isn't condemning anything you're saying. This is just my feeling. I'd love to hear what you're saying is that I'm not there to tell that guy how to use the kindness of others. That is up to him. And if he continues to do that, then there's nothing we can do with that. And we've all watched homeless people in a certain area deteriorate into less and less and less. And that is their journey. But for me, man, I just feel like the act of kindness is what we're all here for, to give it away, to help others. And what they choose to use it for is kind of their their energy. What are your thoughts?
Oh,
on that?
absolutely. So, I mean, I would never discourage someone in the moment if the spirit is moving them to have a human interaction with another human. I would say have a conversation at some level first, maybe to kind of feel it out. I like to also be upfront with my own prejudices and biases because we all have them. Mine is from direct experiences and from people on the street, and I tend to be kind of cynical. But lately, as I've been now as a citizen journalist talking with people on the streets, trying to understand the meth trade that's happening here in this town, there's been some times where I've given money specifically because of this guy. It was early in the day. He was shaking. He needed to actually get a drink. And I support a person getting a drink if they need it at that level. I've put homeless people on buses myself to other communities. So I've actually been engaged in that kind of behavior. But the difference is I found a family member in Florida. This guy was like retired in Missoula is what he kept on telling me, but he was drunk enough where he gave me his sister's phone number one day. So I called the sister and he was like on a lease in a condo in Florida. And I'm like, hey, dude, we can't handle your retirement here. So I got him on a bus to Florida, but I made sure he left with like 3 or 4 small little bottles of vodka because I didn't want him going into like withdrawals on the way and get lost in the Midwest or something. I wanted him to get back home and get to the family, So I think it's in the moment, whatever you feel is what's going to be good. And it's not me to judge what they're going to do with it. If I want to give some money, if I'm doing it out of love and support in that bigger picture, we are small little specks in a much bigger picture. And so I would encourage you to do what the spirit moves you to do, Sam.
And this kind of gets into a subject I've been wanting to talk about on this show so much is like, how do we deal with the homeless? How do we do it? I've tried to have so many people come on and talk about. We had a friend of mine named Chris. He came on and talked about what he's doing with veterans, and that's great. But I'm really about like and veterans are a big part of this.
Oh yeah,
the crippling problem that these democratic cities are having with homelessness. Now, I say democratic because you kind of touched on this. Giuliani didn't clean up New York City. What he did in a way, in the sense that he took the homeless, put them on buses, and sent them to liberal cities to deal with it. And it happens all the time in California. We are constantly the dump of other states' problems.
Yep.
And that's what makes me laugh about this whole narrative about California is you have all these states mocking our homeless situation when in reality we are taking your problem. And there's a point that I go, yeah, let's figure this out. If you don't want to take them, you're in the cold, you think it's a bad place for them to be. We have all this here. Let's try to fix it. But the problem is you got somebody like Gavin Newsom who is like, send us your homeless, and you're like, you're never going to have to deal with any of this, Newsom.
Yeah,
Where you live and all the shady shit you do, this never comes into your life.
Yep.
And we have a situation here where you have people, especially liberals, older liberals from about, let's say, 30 and up, who are constantly complaining about homelessness, crime, skyrocketing prices of everything, but yet refuse to not vote for the people who are making these policies.
Yeah.
That the identity politics of R versus D, right versus left, is stronger than their desire to make their community better. So my question to you is like, what are your thoughts on how we deal with this? Like, because I think there's 2 different types of homeless, right? There is the person who life went bad and they fell through the cracks and they don't want to be there. And I hear these stories all the time in recovery. And then there's the people that just love living outside. And how do you deal with those two? And how do we save the ones who want to get saved? And then how do we deal with the ones that don't want to be saved?
Yeah, and it's, actually have the answer, and the answer is simple. Sorry, actually, I'll just say it really quick.
Actually, are you muted? Okay, go on.
you have to have a carrot and a stick. You have to have actual treatment programs, but you have to have the consequences for people that are just being so antisocial and committing such so many crimes. And so a carrot and a stick. It's really not that difficult, actually.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about our friends at Lucy and their new Lucy capsule nicotine pouches. Okay, look, we're all adults here. Okay, and some of us choose to use nicotine to relax, focus, or just unwind, and that's why Lucy's excited to tell you about their Lucy nicotine capsule pouches that are a flavored ball inside each pouch that crush for an extra burst of flavor. Okay, burst, bang, a party in your mouth. Guess what, Xavier, and everybody's coming, okay? Ooh. Lucy nicotine capsule pouches include coconut oil to provide a soft, fluffy texture that enhances the flavor and doesn't dry out your mouth. They come in 2 strengths, okay? 4 and 8 milligrams. Oh, bam! Huh? It's going hard in the paint. And they have 3 exclusive, delicious flavors: spearmint, mango, and cool cider, dude. Cool cider, I love. So here's what we're going to do. It's 2021. Don't compromise when you're choosing your nicotine product. Go with the newest tobacco-free options from Lucy. Tinfoil Hat listeners, listen, go to lucy.co and use the promo code TINFOIL to get 20% off your order of Lucy nicotine capsule pouches or any other Lucy products, okay? That's lucy.co and use the promo code TINFOIL at checkout, okay? And that's tinfoil, one word. Also, I have to give this disclaimer. Warning! The product contains non-tobacco nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. That's lucy.co. And be sure to use the promo code TINFOIL.
So what I was saying, when I lived in Anaheim, in front of the Angel Stadium, there was a riverbed full of homeless people. Their solution, obviously, it's in front of the Angel Stadium. They were harassing people that were going to the game. Their solution was give these people hotels. They gave them 2 weeks hotels, so they gave them a place to party, and they cleaned the place up. It looks great now. You can drive your bike right past it, but now these people just went somewhere else. But no one got cleaned up. And people thought that's a solution. What do you do?
Well, that goes as out of sight, out of mind. That's what that is. And that's what they did. You know, the internet wasn't what it was when Giuliani was running everything. So nobody goes, where do these homeless people go? Oh, they're getting taken care of. Yeah.
One time on my street, next to this park in LA, in West Hollywood, that just one day, a camp appeared, tents, lining the street, just one day. And what we found out a couple weeks later was that they were all living in an abandoned building, and the abandoned building got cleared out, and suddenly they just sprouted up like turnips on I think turnips are in the ground, aren't they? Like I don't know, grass. And what they did was it took months and months, and they would have like live news helicopters there watching them fight in the streets, and like in this nice neighborhood, that was really peaceful. And this may be a way they deal with it in other places too, but because they're not allowed to move them in LA, they have this loophole that they use. They are allowed to move anybody's property if they are doing street cleaning. And so what they do is put up these notices saying, hey, if your property's on the street, on the sidewalk, it's going to get chucked out, or you're in trouble. And they just cleaned every day for 2 weeks. So that and then finally they all had to go find somewhere else. And I'm sure now they're, down at Venice or somewhere like that. But
well, let me give you some really interesting perspective, because I can both point to how I was a major part of a solution in a outdoor homeless encampment area. And then I can describe what happened after I left my job and it all went to fucking hell. This is brilliant because in the Reserve Street area. So in Missoula, Reserve Street's kind of like one of the main thoroughfares that goes to like the box stores. It's kind of west of the downtown core. And so under bridges, around bridges tend to be these areas that are jurisdictionally problematic. And so fish, wildlife parks and city and county and private land, it's a patchwork of jurisdictions, and that allows people to kind of point the finger. In my job, I never really worried about that. I said, okay, what can we do to actually just do some cleanup? And so I collaborated with the health department. with a nonprofit called the Clark Fort Coalition. And we all got together twice a year to do a major cleanup. I made sure that everyone knew it was going to happen beforehand. So 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, I'd go out there, and I went out there year round, actually forming those relationships with people so they would start to trust me. I would give out socks and sack lunches and all this stuff. But we would make sure people knew the cleanup was happening. And I tell you, we cleaned up tons of trash, 7 to 8 tons of trash that would accumulate between, 8, 9 months in this pretty spread out area. But it was a balance, kind of an equilibrium. The homeless folks that I would talk to would be like, hey, this is a 1-day cleanup. Realistically, you pitch your tent again, we're not going to like harass you. We're just going to come and do it in like 4 or 5 more months. And so I left my job, and the first cleanup they did, the newspaper decided to be there. There wasn't a good relationship with the nonprofit I used to work at and the newspaper. And so they had this tearful picture of this woman crying. And I'm saying that cynically because I looked really closely and you see the glass pipe in her hand. And the shelter was zero tolerance at the time. And in the article, she's doing this sob story, like, I can't sleep with my husband at the homeless shelter. That's why we're out here. It's like, yeah, because there's a lot of domestic violence situations. And so, couples can't sleep in the same dorms. Sorry. But because of this bad publicity, everyone got scared and was like, no, we can't do this to the poor homeless people. And I'm just like, what the fuck? No, you have to make the distinctions between and Sam, what you were talking about in terms of different populations. There's a lot more than just 2, but for general purposes, there's year-round sort of chronic homeless people that the community usually knows, and the transient seasonal population that comes through for us is the warm weather months. And I very much make those distinctions because the people I worked with on the ground were scared a lot of times of the seasonal people that would come through. And I can tell you about some murders and FBI most wanted shit that I was involved in during my time.
No, well, yeah, of course we want to hear about all that. I mean,
it's crazy shit.
I mean, we'll get into that. So 100%. So, the question is, okay, so Montana, I'm going to assume it's conservative.
It's conservative mostly, but Missoula is that liberal enclave.
It's the Austin of Montana.
Exactly, 100%.
And here are big issues when you have that, is that you get a concentration of one group. It's kind of like when you look at a jelly donut and there's that red right there. Well, that's what it is with liberals in Texas, right? It's just like they're like, I can't take this. And, it's so interesting because they just all go to Austin. Now, I know that Texas is considered a red state, but, I've been to Texas a lot lately through stand-up. I think it's conservative in the sense that it is, don't tax me, don't take my guns, and, don't touch my children, which I don't know why that last one is considered conservative, but it is. So, and the point being is that it's kind of this thing that I see is going on that I would put myself into, which is this kind of overlapping of old school liberal and libertarian. Because you can get as weird as you want in Texas. I mean, it's not like it's Bible thumping stuff. There is that aspect if you want it, but it is pretty laid back, open-minded, have fun, get weird, do what you want to do. Again, just don't take my guns and don't tax me, which, I'm totally open-minded to. So what gets really scary is you get this group of people, these super liberals, right? And they get together. Most of them come from middle upper class. So they don't have any real world experience, like what kind of you're talking about, which is like FBI murder stuff that's going on. So everything they see is through these idealistic rose colored glasses. And what they think they're doing is they're helping people by allowing them to turn every block into a shithole. And to me, you're not helping people. You're actually allowing them to continue a certain lifestyle that is not beneficial to them in the long run. And you're actually hurting them. But the problem is that these groups, and this is what I think conservatives do better than the liberal side, and I am liberal, okay, is they're really good at getting rid of their crazies. Like the Republican Party, say whatever you want about them, and I can go off on them forever. But they got rid of that super duper like beyond crazy religious, extremists that were like yelling about gays and all that stuff, that people are like, dude, live and let live, right? The liberal side, the progressives it's going to be really hard for them to get that, because their whole identity is based on, supporting the little guy. And right now the little guys are blue-haired, batshit, non-binary fucking whack jobs. Okay. And they're just destroying it. And they're flooding Austin, and they're allowing chaos to happen while they complain about how unsafe it is to be a woman, how unsafe it is to be a gay, how unsafe this is, and unsafe that is, all the while refusing to do anything about it because that could be deemed as conservative stuff. Am I close on that at all?
Well, in Montana, it's interesting. Montana Democrats were sort of the Hillary Clinton money launderers, and they're part of like the new party from the 90s in Missoula anyways. And so they've dominated this kind of neoliberal, like, we're corrupt, but we have the nice messaging PR stuff going. So
yes,
and there's enough college turnover in this town that no one sticks around long enough to actually have a memory of what's transpired. But I'll give you a perfect example of one of the things happening in Missoula. Okay. And that's the refugee relocation program. So I was a critic 5 or 6 years ago when they reopened the office here, because I was working at a shelter and I was like, hey guys, 5% vacancy rate in the rental market, maybe not a great place to be bringing the Congolese, fleeing wars. And so of course, no one listens to me, but I remember one of the articles that we had families like in planes arriving, and this lady from New York City who was working in the office out here was like, hey, Missoula, we have families arriving and we can't do like co-sign the lease, and they don't have any rental history and they don't have any credit. And oh my gosh, we can't find property management companies that are going to rent to them. And I'm sitting there with like a full homeless shelter thinking, hey, did you guys think about talking to any service provider in this town before you decided that we needed to become the white saviors of all of the foreign wars? But I know that liberals here in this town love their food trucks, and they love authentic ethnic food trucks. And so maybe that was part of the motivation, is like, hey, bring them to get the food trucks going. But ultimately now we have an Afghan refugee who was accused of rape. So he's accused of a sexual assault. He took a white girl, not that the race of the girl matters, but he took this girl to a hotel and allegedly sexually assaulted her.
For the news, it does. For the news,
right?
Really
I know, especially in our town. But it's weird because I'm trying to get people in this town to also, at the same time with their virtue signaling, to actually care about murders that have happened at the homeless shelter of a black man. I'm trying to get them to care about.
Dude, if they get rid of murders, what podcasts are they going to listen to?
Excellent point, Sam.
Right? I mean, it's unbelievable that kind of like, oh my God, we got to feel for people, love people, and then run home and listen to murder entertainment. No, but you're completely and utterly right, dude. You're completely and utterly right. And so much of this like liberal movement is really just theatrics.
Yeah.
It's just so when they go back to their homes where, in neighborhoods where their rich husbands or their rich wives or whoever they are there, and they call their father and their grandfather, who completely and utterly participated in the patriarchy, right? They can all feel better about themselves, and it's never getting anything really done. It's never getting anything really done. But my God, if you're like a male comic who asks a female feature for a blowjob, oh my God, you're the fucking new Hitler, right? But it's like when a guy runs, some dude who raped 5 children, dropped the N-bomb multiple times before he got shot, dies, suddenly you're like, oh my God, why do we live in this kind of world?
One of the great things about how I'm approaching my activism and my journalism in this town, in my art, is because it's really difficult for the entrenched political establishment. Our mayor's been in power for 16 years and he just won his 5th term, so he's going to be around for 20. But it's very hard for them to smear me because I worked at a homeless shelter for 7 years, and I'm talking from my direct experiences working with a lot of these different populations. And so I'm in this unique position now where I'm trying to bring attention to how nonprofits are pushing a political agenda. But it's also weird because you mentioned sort of kind of crazy right-wing Christian. Well, a lot of the places I'm going to now and talking to people is in these Christian congregations. And I just was at this very interesting sort of some kind of right-wing Christian groups came to support this guy in a local church because he tried to pull out of a food sack program because our Missoula food bank decided to put some inserts, some LGBT inserts in the lunches, and some people in this church got upset about it. And so because this guy pulled out of the lunch program, now he's also a realtor, and the realtors organization is trying to cancel him because he said like this is hate speech. And so I decided to support free speech and go and support this guy. But man, there were some LGBT kind of rhetoric from some of these right-wing pastors, unfortunately.
Well, that is defined too. I go on the road. There's a lot of, religious people there that just want to, and the more and more I study spirituality and religion, the more and more I realize it's a personal thing. And I'm not going to get into God business. Now that's just me. That's not everybody, of course. I can't really say anything about that. But the really like the Westboro Baptist Church and stuff like that kind of craziness that was going on forever. That's it. Again, I say it all the time, and I'm going to say it again. Red states are the best states to do stand-up in. And I know that's a weird prism to look through everything because it affects my life directly. But I tend to say, the people that are more laughing at crazier stuff tend to have a unique view of the world. Mm-hmm. And that's my whole thing. That I'm not going to sit there and tell you that people telling people how to live their life through some religious spectrum are any kind of holy roller or anybody that walks on water. Well, these are the people I can get weird with now. When I want to talk about transhumanism and demon possession, it's like, hey, I think some of these homeless folks are like taking meth and actually having walk-in demon possession. It's like the churches are where I can go and actually kind of find some people that are willing to take that seriously instead of just look at me like I'm insane. It's like, no, like, listen, I'm seeing some shit here and it's fucking crazy. Dude, you're bringing up great, and I really want to get into that stuff too. Yeah. So I'm just clarifying that I'm not anti-religious people, and I have no problems with. And guess what? I'm really kind of like, my whole thing is when it comes to children, we don't need to be pushing any kind of lifestyle on anybody. Let kids be kids, let them figure it out. And if a kid decides that he is gay, there should be places for him to go to talk to people about that. But we're not going to change an entire way of raising children because suddenly a couple rich people think the game has to change. And that's my whole thing. So I totally understand that. If you're just trying to feed people and then you're just shoving like trans stuff into these packages, it's just like, what are we doing here? Here's an interesting area where I can kind of be a bridge because, while I saw this pastor in this congregation talk about transhumanism, I've also interviewed Alison McDowell because Alison McDowell in her research is absolutely mind blowing, even though she's sort of anti-crypto and, which I don't want to get into that since, that she's very sensitive about crypto. But Alison McDowell, when I talked to her, I don't think she'll come on the show because it's on Rockfin. She won't, unfortunately. And that's unfortunate because, these are tools that we can use. And I have a little bit of crypto. That's why I got a little frustrated that she was such a purist. And Derek Bros is amazing. Ryan Christian is amazing. I'm a subscriber of Rockfin. I really value where the content is giving me the most information. And so, I am excited about the possibilities of using tools. And I'm not a big fan of technology. I have 3 kids and I battle the screen every fucking day. Every day, remote learning for them is very difficult. And when I think about transhumanism, I think about grooming behavior of predators and sociopaths, because working at a shelter, you see the people that need help, but guess what? A lot of people come to the shelter because they're kind of looking to find victims. I've actually had conversations with clients that are legitimate victims of mind control kind of conditioning from the 60s and 70s. And that no one takes them seriously. But I was like, on the phone, yeah, I do. I'm familiar with MKUltra client. Yes, I am familiar. Oh, you were conditioned to starve yourself when triggered with verbal programming. Oh, wow. I believe you. Dude, so much of what you're talking about is there's a lot to get in on that. First of all, and this is where homelessness is dark. this is even darker.
Oh, yeah.
So much of these people out here were foster kids that probably disappeared and were put through a grinder that most of us would never understand. And that's another reason why I give them like I do, because I know that a lot of these people out here, you see them, they have this kind of disconnect.
Yeah.
That is just like, I don't know if all the love in the world could fix that at this point, because what they've gone through when they, so it's like, everybody could be pro life and that's great. And, when I went, I forget what his name is. I went on a show and he's asking me about, am I pro life or pro choice? And I get to the point where I'm like, I don't like the government tell anybody what to do with their body. I'm not going to do mental gymnastics because I don't necessarily agree with one thing or the other way. It starts, the government doesn't tell anyone to do it. But just know that a lot of these kids who come through that are brought to birth and put up to foster kids care, they disappear every year, hundreds of thousands. And people don't think that number is real. That number is 100% real. And something happens to those kids.
And
what about
go ahead.
border? How about the kids on the border? How many kids those disappear? No one's going to account for those, and those are just lost. They died on the river, trafficking. They're just gone. They're going to put in somewhere some MKUltra. It's going to get weird.
Yeah, and
it's already gotten weird.
Unfortunately, my cynicism, there's a lot of focus now on missing Indigenous women, and so one of the things that informs my cynicism is sort of watching the predictive programming of fiction, like True Detective. And from what I understand from the first season of True Detective is you create a task force to cover up stuff, not necessarily to find things, but to cover up stuff. So locally, there was an opportunity for me to, I like to insert myself where I don't have any business really actually being, and so there was this task force with these important people, like part of the state and local jurisdictions talking about this really attractive missing Indigenous woman. And I think she got attention because she's really attractive. That's part of it, right? She was a sexy one to sell in terms of a missing person. And so there's a task force and there's money. And I joined this Zoom meeting and I was like, hi, I used to work at the homeless shelter. I'm trying to do a volunteer cleanup at the Reserve Street camps. But I'm being blocked by United Way of Missoula County and people like Susan Hay Patrick. Could you help me? Because I found the ID of a Salish Kootenai woman, a young woman, in the trash out at this homeless camp. And having worked at the shelter, I know these no-go zones are places that people disappear. So if you can just help us do some volunteering, it might actually help your missing Indigenous task force. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, which is fucking bullshit, because you under-resource the local efforts to find people, and there's reasons for that. And there's a missing woman right now, Rebecca Barsati, that I've talking to the family because she went missing in July west of Missoula, and I am increasingly suspicious of what is happening in the rural parts of our county and what's going on with meth trafficking. And the local authorities aren't doing anything about it, for good reason, I think, but it's crazy.
We are finding more and more that these task force are not there to do anything. Like the finders. I should take that back. There's FBI doing stuff. I believe.
There's good people. There's good people within law enforcement.
Right.
There are.
There's good people. Did
you know that the Gabby Partida case? Her followers found her, not even the police. That's how much her followers were more important about her. They saw her missing. Where's the last place she went? Started connecting dots. It had nothing to do with the FBI. It wasn't even missing person. It was her fans that made a big deal about it. That made it more of a thing.
Yep. I'm telling you, bro. I'm telling you this. I have intuition. Bat signals. My spider senses. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And there is something to that case, to this Kyle Rittenhouse case, to this guy driving through the Christmas parade that makes me, it reeks of psyops. And it's like, Johnny, I sent you some pictures. I don't want to get into what exactly they were, but it's like, if this Rittenhouse is a psyop, what is this? How do they do that? Do they set this thing in motion and this guy sacrifices his arm and then this becomes a thing. I mean, we know that George Floyd, there's so much stuff about the George Floyd case that doesn't make sense. Like when it supposedly when it goes down, nobody in the picture or the video is wearing masks. Nobody's wearing masks. Everybody in the world was masked up at that moment. Not one person in the video is masked, which makes you wonder, did it happen at the time they wanted it, that they said it happened?
Sorry, no, I don't mean to interrupt you, Sam. I'm so eager to.
By the way,
perspective.
You could totally interrupt me because I've been doing that to everybody lately, so I deserve it. So go on.
One of the things I think might be happening, and I love Monica Perez and Brad Binkley of the Propaganda Report. I think that's some of the best sort of daily or weekday stuff that I listen to that gives me an idea of what some of these trends might be, because
they are great.
A lot of what is happening is taking us away from doing things in person, in real life, directly with people. And so if you're putting energy in being like an armchair sleuth from some case in some other state or other part of the country, there's now Netflix shows that cat one where all of these sort of like citizen journalists, like not citizen journalists, because that's kind of what I'm trying to do, but these sort of activated online sleuths. It's a whole trend. It's become a whole phenomenon. And if we just are doing the surveillance state work for this surveillance state that, panopticon kind of thing that's descending, I'm a huge fan of taking synchronicities, and I've talked to Mark about this, and Michael Wan and Jason Horsley is another great synchronistic. And it's not about just like watching movies and finding Illuminati symbolism. You have to go in person in your own life and see on the ground what is happening. I did a higher side chat. Oh, and then I'll stop talking for a second. I did a higher side chat meetup just last Friday, and I met this new guy who has this piece of the local puzzle, and it was amazing. And it's because I'm going out there in person, talking to people in the flesh, in meat space. So much of what's happening, even with like the Travis Scott Houston thing, right? Which kind of annoyed me. On November 5th, I celebrated 16 months of not drinking alcohol. I'm a Travis, and this Travis Scott guy does like some satanic, ritual. But part of what Monica Perez and Binkley were talking about is this is going to scare kids from doing things in person, having like in-person experiences. And so just join the metaverse and go online and just be part of this metaverse. It's like, fuck that, man.
Oh yeah. For a guy who has daughters that are under 2 years old, like, the metaverse will be in full swing by the time they're old enough to understand what that is and what the implications of that are. And, I don't think that Facebook's metaverse is going to be the one that is going to work, because I think the one that really goes is going to be a more decentralized one, or appear as decentralized, kind of like the internet versus, Facebook, which is controlled by Facebook. Why would you want to go in to Facebook's metaverse where they're running everything and making it $1 off of everything, when you go to the decentralized one and where it's like nobody owns it?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. 100% everything. I mean, and here's what's really interesting, going back to blue states, red states. You're seeing comedians, especially quote unquote liberal comics, are going in the states, and 30% of their crowd isn't showing up to their shows. They're buying tickets and not showing up. Whereas you go to red states, they're full on participating, living their life. Florida, Oklahoma has now gotten rid of you don't have to have any kind of vaccine mandate going on. It's happening more and more and more, and we're seeing it happen more and more. But then, we talk about this, I've talked about this on other shows. So everybody's leaving California, right? But why is the price of property going up more and more in California? Well, because everybody's leaving California, thinks these policies are nuts, and they're going to other states that are doing the opposite. Well, in those other states where everything is being quote unquote done correctly, no mandates, no nothing, there's people there that think it's crazy, and they're moving to California.
Yeah.
So now we're getting more and more siloed than ever. More and more, you're going to have one state just packed full of idiots, and another state that's just packed full of people who are quote unquote awakened. And it's just
what's going to happen. I think the way that the debt is going to be used, Allison McDowell, again, her research is amazing. And when I talked to Allison, I was talking about some of the stuff happening already among the homeless population getting into services. Like I remember running into this Native American guy, and he was telling me kind of under his breath, he's like, "Hey, Travis, I'm in this unit. I think they're watching me." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He tore off the panel, and they found like a camera inside this panel, and it's like a Salt Lake City funded program, so it's like Mormon connected or something. And you know, there was this way of I think taking this debt and operationalizing it that was happening for service providers sort of early on, and not necessarily debt, but some of these technology solutions and programs. So an example really quick. You know, working with chronic alcoholics and drug users, there's anything that we can do. When I was working in the shelter, that would be a help, you know, to a service would be beneficial. And so we're so desperate, we're just wanting anything that can work, right? And so I remember when this University of Wisconsin program came and said, "Hey, we're developing this app. It's great. It's 24/7 in your hand. It's got like your support system. It's got information on YouTube you can watch. It's got geolocation. So if you go to the place where you score, it'll send like an alert, you know, and so it was like this like 24/7 technology solution to an addict to not, you know, relapse." And I'm like, okay, if it works, it works. You know, I'm not going to criticize anything that might work. But this is where that dialectic, I don't know if that's the right term, but the problem reaction solution, where I'm now in this mindset of like, okay, you're allowing or creating the problems to steer the reaction towards your transhumanist solution.
Yes.
And it's so mind blowing now to look at some of the stuff that I used to advocate for and see it as this well-intentioned path towards a totalitarian control system. And I now am just like, we have got to resist. Now in person, you have to go, and I hear this talked about a lot on podcasts, go understand your city council, your county attorney, your county sheriff.
Okay.
You have to do that.
A lot to get into.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. I want to talk about three more things real quick.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to talk about how my favorite thing is when an app, you go on and you download a new app and it goes, the app would like to track you.
Sure.
Yes, let it, or ask it to please not, which is not saying it won't. It's just saying ask it not to. And then just like probably every fucking app is just like every AI, blue-haired, nose pierced, hoops, fucking beta, non-binary cock will be like, "No, I'm following you." And then it's tracking you. It doesn't say it's not going to track you.
Yeah,
it just says ask it not to. "Hey, could you not track me?" "Nah, I'm tracking you. I'm tracking you." So that's a big thing. And that's happening more and more. And it's on weird apps. You're like, some of these apps, you're like, why is the Soundbox sound effect app wanting to track me? Right? Like, what are you getting out of that? Soundbox sound effect app? What is that about?
Well, think about that app, though. Think about what a lot of those apps where you just get something for free, you know, and you're like, "Oh, this is cool. Thanks for that." They're making their money somehow. They're not just giving you
your
sound
data.
effects, you know what I mean? Exactly, dude. They're selling your location data.
Yeah.
That's the logic. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Google. That's Google.
Well, that's what I tell my kids, because the way, you know, Sam, my youngest, my little girl is 5. And so she watches Netflix. I'm not going to be the parent that says, "No, you can't do this," because it didn't work for me, right? Parental advisory stickers were the albums I went to go seek out and listen to Marilyn Manson and smoke weed in the basement and get depressed. And so I'm not going to just deny it for my kids, but I sit there and I watch the program that my little girl's watching. And it's like, it starts off in real life and it's a real girl and a real horse. And then she has this wearable wrist thing, and it goes into the augmented reality where the fairies are always, of course, shapely, you know, and this is where they are being groomed at this sort of like, you know, entertainment level. You have to kind of work with it. I think you can't just, you know, put your foot down and say, "You can't do this." But at the same time, I'm like, this is insidious. What they are slowly moving into place, and using a pandemic and all of this manipulation and fear. You know, I went through the fear fog in the first couple of months, but I stopped drinking alcohol at a certain point, realizing that this was a war being declared on us by sociopaths, and that I had to fucking level up myself for my kids' sake, because you know, I wrote last December they're going to be coming for the kids, you know, and that's my red line. And now I'm like, okay, this is actually how you have to put some things in place, because A couple of weeks ago, I had my mom pick up my kids because the vax clinic was happening in their school, and I didn't want them to accidentally just go into one of the rooms and get jabbed by some well-intended crazy person. So it's at a level now that's pretty intense.
And they've been doing that forever, dude. I mean,
yeah,
I was pitching TV shows very early, a long time ago, to MTV. And I remember one time the guy goes, "How does this entertain 13-year-old girls?" And I would think about what was on television on MTV at the time. I'm like, teenage moms and stuff like that, and how like lowbrow, awful that programming is. And the reason it's a big deal is because if you can really kneecap somebody early on, it makes it so hard for people to pick themselves back up. The best example is this movement of rappers who tattoo their face. And out of nowhere, you just start seeing everybody with face tattoos. And you know where else you see that all the time? The homelessness. It's not universal, but it's close. I mean, so many of these people have face tattoos. How hard is it to go to a job?
Yeah.
I mean, even like Burger King and get a job. Hey, hi, welcome. I have a unicorn on my cheek. Can I get you a hamburger? Right? They don't like any of that. So this stuff is meant to cripple you, make bad decisions. When you watch, Miley Cyrus on her early days in the MTV Movie Awards, where she's literally going ass to ass with another girl. These movements, these acts are done to monkey see, monkey do.
Well, no, think about it. Think about the face tattoos. Okay. Think about this in a different way a bit. Okay. If you take the premise that we are moving into this open air prison planet, okay, and they're going to actually deinstitutionalize prisons because they're done with those kind of brick building prisons. It's going to be a more open air surveillance prison. Maybe it's a nice visual cue for you to see more people with face tattoos, because that'll be a subtle, unconscious reminder that you are now part of that prison planet. You are in more consistent direct proximity. And one of the things happening locally is county attorneys like our county attorney, Kirsten Pabst, who had a book written about her love of rapists. I say that kind of hyperbolically. She's defended some rapists in the past in ways that were very controversial. But a book by John Krakauer was written about Missoula and the rape problem, and the non-prosecution of rape cases. And one of the things that I'm looking into is a sort of like a systemic way of not prosecuting more and more crimes. And so the latest podcast that I just put up, I'll put up actually later today, talks about Kirsten Pabst specifically, and gets into some of her messaging about why it's important to steer would-be criminals to diversion programs. One of the things about Montana, though, is we don't have a lot of services for these programs. Like Montana is unique in the fact that we have about 1 million people in this entire state. And that is a small number when you think about the huge size of the state.
That's on my block. I have 1 million people on my block.
Exactly. And so that's one of the things I try and explain. Like Montana doesn't have the services and programs. And so what Kirsten Pabst is essentially saying is we are going to not go after some cases. And there was examples, one of the things that I'm looking into is the death of Sean Stevenson. And Sean Stevenson was a man using homeless services at the Poverello Center, and he was assaulted on January 3rd, 2020. He was taken to the hospital and removed from life support on January 5th without his family ever being notified. The alleged assailant, Johnny Lee Perry, he was shot and killed by sheriff deputies on August 29th of this year. I still have yet to learn the names of the sheriff deputies involved in shooting him. There are things that are happening with non-prosecution to the point where I'm starting to think in terms of like the face tattoos, because I see those kind of folks on the streets more and more. I'm starting to understand the county detention facility locally is almost being a place where I think people are going to re-up to get their energy, to get some stability, to get back out in the game. Because what I think is happening with cartel activity in small towns is substantial. I think on a bigger picture, you have the Biden administration allowing the sort of controlled demolition of this country. We'll be a local or we'll be a regional hegemon. And I think Biden has a lot of interesting ties to some of the organized criminal elements that are coming through the borders. I really think that they are doing some very nefarious shit And small towns like Missoula are not immune. I mean, the motel system is where they're trafficking humans, young boys and girls. It's part of the human trafficking, meth trafficking network. And it's a really insidious thing. People have to get more active locally to start understanding their own dynamics in their own backyard.
I mean, go on.
You brought up the cartel. The reason I'm gonna say that is everyone always sees here in LA, they got the ice cream man, they have the person that sells the flowers, the guy that sells the hot dogs. That's not their cart. That's not cheap. They don't come crossing the border and then they have a cart. That's run by the cartel that owes them money crossing the border or whatever, and they got to pay their dues. They're working for someone. That's expensive. Those carts that keep the ice cream cold all day, that's pricey. And like you said, the cartels and everything. So when you think you're buying flowers from the Mexican lady, she might get some money for that, but that cut is straight to the cartel. She don't come in here with money just to buy these flowers.
Johnny Lee Perry, before he was shot and killed by sheriff deputies, I mean, he came here from Oakland, and he was using services at the shelter. I actually talked to him back in April, and he told me he was a TI, a targeted individual. We had a long conversation about voice to skull stuff, things that he might be experiencing. And it really alarmed me because he was I have a pretty good bullshit detector, and he seemed to be fairly on the level about him believing he was experiencing this stuff. When I saw him in August, a couple months later, he was very agitated. He was acting erratically. I took video footage of him basically saying he can kill at will. He's the new CIA. He's walking up and down the sidewalk without his shirt on with his hands in the air like they're guns. And I videotaped this. I put out this limited version of this on August 16th, and then he is shot and killed on August 29th. This guy, Johnny Lee Perry, knew things about what happened to Sean Stevenson inside the Poverello Center. The family, my first podcast episode was interviewing his sisters, Sean Stevenson's sisters. And I can't even get local organizations like the Montana Human Rights Network, who care about Black people, supposedly. I can't even get them to listen to the interview. I'm just like, you guys are taking donations in Montana in a liberal community that virtue signals how much we care about minority populations. And I'm like, hey, listen to this interview with Jayshell Stevenson and Angela Stevenson, the sisters of Sean Stevenson. He was killed, and what? We're not going to ever get clear answers about what happened. So it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me what can happen in a town like this,
I think I've said this before, as a guy who did speed, right? I didn't do crystal meth. I did speed, by the way.
Yeah.
I believe that there is dark energy when crystal meth, that brings in spirits, negative energy, negative beings. I believe that's alcohol as well. It lowers your vibration, which allows entities to walk in and possess you. And you see it happen all the time. I mean, they all look possessed by demons. I see it happen all the time. And listen, man, this is going to sound like a really crazy thing, but I've said this before on other podcasts, man. So what we're seeing going on right now in Australia, right?
Yeah.
You have a government that is doing, I mean, things that we've never seen governments in our time. We never thought we would see camps. They are now they're not just grabbing people to test positive. You're not grabbing people to test positive. You're grabbing people to test positive and contact, close contact. I mean, you could be at Subway and the guy next to you has COVID. They sense that you're going to the camps. Think about that.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we've seen this in Latin America. We've seen this in Africa. Why aren't gun runners running guns to these people? This is a giant group that could be paying money for fucking weapons to push back against the government. It's not happening. Why isn't it happening? Because just like everything we're noticing, all these outlaws and rebels were fucking part of the system. The gun runners, the every movie, Nicolas Cage, Lord of Wars, right? It's all part of the system. And they're all part of the system, and they're used until they're no longer worthy or have any purpose, and then they're arrested or killed or whatever, just so they don't tell any secrets. That's the same thing with drugs in this country. How are drugs getting into this country, man? How are these fucking cartels getting all these drugs in? Well, because the powers that be that run everything are wanting the drugs to come in.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things to think about is like, you think about World War II and rat lines. These things are inherited by the next power structure that comes in. I heard it described, and I can't remember where this came from. I think it was George Webb or something, who's kind of a questionable source, but he was talking about the fall of the Soviet Union and all these Eastern Bloc countries. What ended up happening is these organized criminal families fill the vacuum of power. And then what happens when they fill the vacuum of power is the next generation, their kids become diplomats and diplomatic immunity. And so when you kind of have that level of immunity, it's amazing what happens. Like locally, what's going on, I think, is that there's been some high profile busts of a meth trafficking ring, and you're wondering, okay, then who replaces that meth trafficking ring? Who's actually filling in? Because there's no disruption in the supply. From what I see downtown in Missoula, no problem, getting all fucking tweaked out. I ran across, I know a lot of people on the streets. And so there was one night, I don't drink anymore, but I love getting real stoned and walking around downtown late at night. It's fascinating to not be a part of the active bar scene, but to walk around. And so at midnight, I see this former client of mine, and he's got a small little portion of crystal meth just like sitting there. He's putting his stuff away and he's about to take off. I'm like, hey, what are you doing, man? Why are you just leaving money on the ground? He's like, oh, that's only $20 worth. I'm like, come on. I'm like, pick that up. You don't want, squirrels get tweaking and shit. Come on. There could be kids the next day. Right. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to go meet this guy at the Ox, man. You want to come with me? I'm like, fuck no, absolutely not. I'm like, are you cooking this shit yourself? He's like, no, I'm getting it from out of state now. And so I actually called someone on the drug task force. And this guy calls me back and says, oh, he's a low level guy. We're not worried about him. I'm like, okay, well, I'm a concerned community member. So I'm going to be taking his picture around and showing people his picture downtown so they are aware. A couple days later, he's back in jail. It's like, oh, that's a convenient thing, And so one of the things I'm really worried about is how the criminal justice system is sort of working with confidential informants. And what's happening with the pandemic now, when you have the shelters and the jail and the hospitals are these different environments now. Cops are having to be forced to deal with a lot of crazy shit on the street. And I have a lot of respect for boots on the ground first responders. It is an insane thing that they are forced to deal with. None of them got in the job they're in thinking that they would be responding to what they're responding to. And so I try and have sympathy. I know there's good people involved, but I think it also creates a situation where it's easy to start justifying, blurring the boundaries and starting to do some shady shit. And there's
I
some
totally
shady
agree
shit.
with you, man. I do, which brings us to the next thing I want to talk about is everybody's trying to change how the country operates. It's not about that. It's change how your community operates. Get involved on a community level, whether it's school boards, city councils. That's all the power in the world. This where the Rittenhouse trial went. They were talking about how like one family is in like every power position.
Yep.
And that's been for probably decades. They've owed their dad's in, their kids are in, their uncles in, and it's just boom, boom, boom. That's how you control power, by positioning your family, your friends, your allies in it. And that's why you have to get in to power. Now, this mayor that has been around for 20 years.
Yeah. It
just seems crazy to me that anybody would vote the same person in that many times.
Well, so here's the thing. This is where I'm very adamant now about people being realistic, that we're in an information war. This is part of the shift of kinetic war is going into psychological war and information war. And so one of the things that I learned in my synchronicity work and talking to Michael Wan and some other people is the role of newspapers and those information bottlenecks. And so John Engen, our mayor, the first guy on his finance committee on his first run was, I think David Talbot was his name. He was part of the Missoulian newspaper industry, right? And something kind of similar in Spokane, where I've been fascinated about waterfront development, because water is a huge part of this amazing stuff that's happening, and controlling water is a part of what I'm looking at locally. But when you look at the Spokane waterfront, which, Sam, I tried to see you in Spokane, but my kid was COVID positive in September. And I verbally berated him. I was like, "This is my chance, kid, and you just ruined it for me."
Why is your kid ruining your dreams?
I'm kidding. I didn't say that to him, but Spokane is I was born there. And so my dad worked at the World's Fair in 74. I was born in 78. And as I looked into the World's Fair and the justification for doing all of this money to develop the riverfront, it was really put forward by this guy named King Cole was his name. I shit you not. King, C-O-L-E, King Cole. And the Cole family owned the Spokesman Review and this, like the other newspaper. And so, as you think about the control of information, this is a huge part of how someone like our mayor, who used to be a reporter for the Missoulian, his public communications person used to be an editor for the Missoulian. Right now, I'm trying to expose United Way of Missoula County. Jim Strauss, the publisher of the Missoulian, is on the board of United Way, and so the incestuousness in a town like Missoula with 80,000 people in the county, it is incredibly incestuous. And it's just very difficult because when you start criticizing it, you get attacked in these asymmetric ways. I've had a guy that I worked with lose his board member position from an art gallery because they were like tied into the local power elite. And so it's interesting because that's how they keep people isolated and afraid by really intimidating you in these asymmetrical ways. And then they control the information and they gaslight you, make you think you're crazy for thinking that it's so corrupt, but it is that corrupt.
No, it really is. And it's like my father said, my grandfather told my father, you can't fight City Hall all the time. And, politics is politics, but there are people that are learning how to flip boards, how to flip school boards, city councils. Yep. And that's really what you got to do. Yep. And the internet kind of destroyed local coverage of everything. And, we no longer get that local newspaper that tells us everything the mayor's doing, everything's, I just did a podcast with Brian Callen today, and we were talking about how there was a board that was put together that voted 14-0 to get rid of Metro Police.
Yeah. How's that going to work?
And they wanted to call them like training ambassadors. Like they wanted to have people to come talk to them with and the problem is that these people are never the ones that ride the train.
Yeah. So let me give you a local example of that. So there is a school board member of the Missoula County School Board system. Okay. She also works at United Way. So that's like her paid position. She also creates Facebook groups and directs political activity through Facebook, which is a direct conflict of interest that she should not be doing. There was a situation a couple of weeks ago at a church where I was in attendance. Our state superintendent of public instruction, Elsie Arnson, was there to answer questions from parents. And so I stood up and I addressed this superintendent and I asked her, as a parent, I am frustrated that a school board member can also direct political activity and work at a nonprofit, and all of that is problematic, and there's no way to hold her accountable. Well, at that same meeting, my lawyer, who was also representing a lot of parents and trying to challenge the mask mandates, he gets up in response to someone saying something, and he makes a joke. Okay, he makes a stupid joke that implies like, oh, maybe we should shoot school board members. And a stupid thing for a lawyer to do, right?
Yeah, that's not read the room.
It's incredibly dumb. But the thing is, no one was supposed to be recording inside the church. That's not a justification for what he said, because that became the focus then in the media. But the stuff that I said, no one paid attention to that. And then a state representative, a Democrat, had snuck into that church, even though there was signage saying do not record. A state representative snuck into the church and recorded anyways. And I filed a police complaint and I was told by the city attorney's office nothing will happen. This guy is a state representative that moved here to Missoula from New York. He used to work at the Department of Homeland Security with refugees, and now he's in Missoula trying to shame us into masking kids because science. I don't know. It's fucking insane.
I can't take it. So there's a story out there about a woman who's been flipping, like she's flipped 8 school boards. She's flipped them. She knows how to do it. She has a system. Her house got raided by the FBI.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I am the kind of parent that Merrick Garland is looking at. And I actually wrote a blog post giving my credentials about how I've helped give information to catch killers. And I want to get into that because credibility is pretty important. But I really think that like I'm like perfect type of parent to be targeted because I stood with a megaphone outside of the United Way building and I spent about 30 minutes speaking my truth. Okay. From what I understand, this is back in the summertime when things were kind of heating up with school board policies. From what I understand, that school board member was sent home early. They were told inside this nonprofit to call 911 if they saw me in the neighborhood. And then a state representative that I'm also trying to expose, a different one, started contacting people I know to say that I was off medications. She's trying to like basically gaslight me behind the scenes. And so, I mean, it's getting nasty and dirty. And I'm like, you know, I don't have fear anymore of a lot of the blowback. They've tried to come at me in some ways. And I'm like, if I'm afraid, I'm just going to sit back and do nothing. And so some people have to be more public and vocal. I feel called to do that. And I hope to empower more people to stand up. And I'm talking to people every day that are starting to realize it's now or never. You know, you got to do something.
I mean, 2 years ago, if you were anti-vaccine and you went to a school board, they would take your kids away. We had a chick on here that was very deep. She posts everything on her social media. She was going through a divorce. She legit had to take that off because her husband or her ex-husband was literally going to be like, hey, you're crazy. You won't let my kid get vaccinated. And now it's a thing at a school board where it's like everyone's debating it. 2 years ago, you're a crazy person. Take the kids away.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable where we're at.
Well, and that's, again, you have to understand where adult protective services, child protective services, these kind of state agencies have a lot of power. You can be put on a 72-hour involuntary hold. People have to realize that red flag laws are one way that they're coming after people. We had locally a woman get in charge of a anti-suicide group, a suicide prevention program, and she covertly had these red flag laws she was trying to push at the state level. And so, I mean, and this is where you don't even have due process. They just come and they take. And then you have to prove later that you're not a harm to yourself, right? And so it's very important to understand what your sort of county laws are when it comes to involuntary holds, where you're at with you know, all kinds of different sort of liberties and, you know, civil rights. It's a weird world. Things are kind of upside down, but that's part of the satanic inversion that these sociopaths are doing. So.
It's just crazy, dude. So you've seen some like murders and stuff like that?
So one of the first times I talked to the FBI is because they were coming around homeless shelters and basically trying to put out flyers about this guy that was traveling with the Rainbow family, but he was producing child porn. So he was using the Rainbow family to sort of move around. And so, you know, I started realizing I was pretty naive at that point. I'm like, wow, there might be serious people coming through the shelter. I had a showdown with this guy named David Bergert. I didn't know him at the time. He since has been connected to the Project 7 militia, and there's a podcast called Project 7 about him. And I was interviewed for that podcast. But at the Poverello Center, the homeless shelter where I worked, I basically was working weekends and had a situation where I told this man he had to leave the bathroom because the building was closed. And I had this altercation with him, just verbal. He took pictures of me and told me I made the biggest mistake of my life, kicking him out of the shelter. About a couple weeks later, I see breaking news. He had taken shots at sheriff deputies and disappeared into the woods. They never found him. He's still on the FBI's top 10 most wanted, I think. I haven't checked in a while, but they suspect he shot himself. And so that was a situation that I had some relation to. And then the most screwed up situation that happened out at this Reserve Street camp area is this guy named Kevin Leno, basically young guy from Massachusetts, kind of charismatic, but totally crazy. Had a bunch of younger people that were following him around like a street gang, but they were living up in the woods in Hellgate Canyon. They started a fire during the summer and they moved to the Reserve Street area. And this guy, Kevin Leno, ended up torturing this other dude and shooting him in the head and dumping the body in the river. I came across the guy's girlfriend after the body was found, and she told me what had happened. And I got that information to the sheriff's department immediately. And that information helped them identify the victim. And it's kind of funny because if cops took homeless people seriously, they actually had 3 chances, law enforcement did, to catch Kevin Leno before he fled from Missoula. They ended up catching him in Louisiana. But they missed opportunities because they didn't take homeless people seriously. And so, I had this interaction with the criminal justice system. And so I had this very different perspective, and being on the other side of it now, kind of looking in from this outside perspective, I wonder what is going on when it comes to trying to catch the bad guy. I think there's a lot of compromised situations that have just gotten worse over the past 2 years. And one thing I want to mention too, if your county is also the coroner, that's a big problem. The sheriff department in Missoula County is also the coroner. And so that's one reason why, a man like Sean Stevenson can be assaulted, then taken to the hospital and removed from life support. The coroner was in the room when that happened, but the family didn't know about it. So crazy shit like that can happen when you're not paying attention to how power rolls in your own backyard.
Well, it's amazing how people act when a paycheck's involved.
Right.
And humanity just leaves and everybody just starts co-signing on the bullshit. Happens all the time. And it's mind-blowing and people know it's wrong. I mean, just look at what's going on in Hollywood with the way all these people just like, they're just lemmings, dude. They're sitting there crying about the Me Too movement, but they're quiet about, every pedophile that gets in trouble. They're crying about George Floyd, but then they're angry about Kyle Rittenhouse. And it's all just according to party lines. And it's just unbelievable to the point they defend a guy who raped 5 boys. And like, people are like, why is this guy even out of jail? Why is he even out of jail? It doesn't matter. They're crying on Instagram, and it's just unbelievable. And they just I love it because it exposes everybody for what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you are seeing, I know maybe I'm the only one who believes this, but I think everybody is starting to come together, that we're starting to identify the crazies and it's not along any color or gender. Like the extremes are being outed. All of these like outlaw brands, Rage Against the Machine. If you go to the concerts, the songs are great. They're hollow as fuck now. They mean literally nothing. Another band should record those songs so I could like them. Really Rage Against the Machine. Somebody else like Ted Nugent.
Well, the best one I've seen is that girl who peed on that guy last week doing that Rage song. That's probably the best performance of a Rage Machine, a Rage song that I've seen.
Couldn't agree more. Golden Showers is a lot more outlaw than crying about Rittenhouse.
Well, one of the strangest things for me has been where are the artists at in terms of trying to be rebels again? There's no punk rockers. All the punk rockers seem to.
They're
really
all
just
podcasters.
And Tom Morello is a communist. He's just a flat out communist. So I don't know why we ever expected anything from that guy.
No, you're right. But dude, I remember when the Democratic National Convention was going down. The Rage Against the Machine shot a fucking whole video down there, and everyone's like, dude, we're pushing back. And then
that's because they weren't left wing enough for Rage Against the Machine. That's why they were protesting that, though, is because they didn't go far enough into making the government take over our lives. I never
thought about that, Johnny. That's a good point.
One of the things that fucked me up the most was Dave McGowan's weird scenes inside the canyon. And during this Higher Side chat meetup that I had, the guy that showed up had weird scenes. I had the book with him, and that turned me upside down in terms of the counterculture back during 67 and 68, and all of the parents that were like military intelligence. And so people like Jim Morrison, who I absolutely identified with, like when I was in suburbia, just being like the little, like, how am I going to rebel? Should I smoke pot and drop acid? Yeah. And then I listened to Jim Morrison because I watched the movie Lost Boys, right? And Lost Boys, when you think back, Corey Haim and Corey Feldman are in there. You have to invite the vampire past the threshold to allow him in. And you got Jim Morrison singing the music, trying to ensnare and seduce a whole nother generation into really what is a metaphysical spiritual area that people don't have the tools to navigate. You start throwing some of these substances in, which I used in a lot of positive ways, but I've also seen it destroy people. And some of the cannabis stuff, man, I I love cannabis, but I sat in this crime prevention seminar and I was sitting there like, I want to hear about the meth and the bad stuff. And then they start talking about all this shattered glass, like all the butane extracted 90% stuff. And I'm like, whoa, like you can't smell it and the teachers don't know about it. And I started shifting into a parent mindset, like, oh man, my kids are going to start sneaking all kinds of, like, I don't want them doing bath salts and, obviously this kind of crazy shit.
Crazy,
so,
dude.
Different world out there when it comes to even just stuff cannabis. And Montana's about to be the wild west of cannabis. We're about to go recreational January 1st. And I got some stories about the cannabis industry in this state.
Oh, dude, all my friends who I love with all my heart, but man, a lot of these guys smoke weed all the time and they become bipolar. And I love them, but I have to handle them with like love because I know I have to watch how I present stuff to them because they could turn on me like, I mean, just turn, dude. And I'm like, whoa, what just happened right there? So and I'm sorry, dude, but weed isn't the grandpa's weed that the hippies used to smoke. Weed is now the fucking the super industrial made in the lab. They're fucking with that shit stuff now. And it's like, oh, I'm just gonna get a little high. That's fine. People are just like going deep. And it's like, dude, that you can't keep messing with your head like that without, and like, I'm listen, dude, I say legalize all drugs. I don't think people should go to jail for them. I think we should figure out a way to take that money, figure out a way to help people, get them into recovery, stuff like that. Sending people to jail for doing drugs is not helping anybody except for the people who own the prisons, which is kind of the whole point of it. So that's my opinion, dude.
We've seen the whole fentanyl in weed lately, right? The whole articles on that.
Yeah.
You know what I think it's the government telling you don't buy weed illegally, go to the clinics and pay the fucking taxes. Because out here in Cali, a lot of people buy it through the homie, under the table, because the taxes is uncredible. But if they give you a word to scare you, hey, it could have fentanyl in it, don't buy it there, go buy it from our clinic where it's taxed 20 times higher. I think that's what they're going with. Because how can you put fentanyl in weed and not notice his white powder on it?
A lot of the tax stuff in Montana, recreational is going to be taxed at like 23 or 24%, and then medical will be at 4%. And there's a lot of people in the state that use cannabis to get off opiates. And so during the legislation and the battles kind of back and forth, some of those chronic pain patients that are using cannabis are sort of seen like a chip to be bargained with, which is awful. Because, I've seen, firsthand the opiate sort of hard drug impacts. And the only problem I had at the homeless shelter with cannabis is like, hey, if you're like spending your limited resources on this and not saving up to get into housing, maybe that's a problem. But I do think that the harm reduction approach, in terms of just, not necessarily having huge criminal impacts on drug use, but at the same time, when you look at Michael Schellenberger's work, he's talking about Europe not allowing these open air drug scenes. People can't shoot fentanyl, over in Portugal. They still had some kind of balance they were able to maintain with consequences. And that's what if there's a carrot and stick approach where you have real treatment and real consequences for people that are just like out of their minds, I think you can see progress.
It's not fully open. They do it inside their tent. Come on, dude. It's not like
no, there's just like if you're causing chaos in the neighborhood, we can kumbaya this to the end of days. But if you're infringing on other people's right to live peacefully, that's when we got a problem. And there's this one guy who goes up and down my street, and man, he looks like a homeless Ari Shafir, and he's just crazy. And I give him money all the time. He never fucks with me because I think he loves my dog. But man, I'm just waiting for something bad to happen to that guy because he's so in your face with nuts. And I don't think he can help it because it's 24/7. It's not like sometimes I see him chill. He's like that all the time, which makes me think that's a wiring issue. But I don't know how you help that guy. How do you help that guy?
Well, wait up. Before he answers that, the cleanup is coming. Los Angeles is having the Olympics in 2028, 2028, and there's no way they're going to let the homeless just kick it like that. So they're going to go somewhere else, at least for a couple months, and then come back later. But the cleanup is coming.
But the question has to be, why are Democrats allowing this to happen?
Yeah, and I think the problem, reaction, solution, because the solution is going to be part of what Biden is doing with trillions of dollars coming from the federal government. They want to have a transformative impact on social engineering. And one of the things, it's not sexy to talk about stuff like zoning. And I'm working on a documentary right now about tax increment financing, which is a little known mechanism that really creates housing affordability problems. But these things aren't necessarily sexy. And because they're not sexy, you don't understand the importance of paying attention to zoning, because as they start looking at tiny home communities and centralized services and places where you have to then use smart grid technology, I mean, I really think they want the problem to be so bad that we uncritically accept the solution, which is a totalitarian kind of, technocratic control system. And so that's where I get worried that this is where a lot of the insanity is being allowed to just metastasize, because ultimately they don't care how much gets destroyed. That Build Back Better is built on the destruction first and then rebuilding this new form of control. And so, that's where my most cynical black pilled stuff goes. But then I play with Legos and I understand the spiritual movements of synchronicities, and I'm very happy and feeling very positive ultimately. So I try and maintain a positive outlook on stuff, even though I go to the antique mall and I find weird stuff like this. And I think that you should trust your intuition when you find objects and your gut is telling you something might be off. You should definitely believe it. For people that are just listening to the podcast, this is a little like black pig with this like the head of a boy and red eyes. And because of this object, I now think I know a local person who is not a good person. And I won't get into too much detail, but you got to be just paying attention to stuff. My wife.
What just happened there?
Sam, you weren't paying attention for a second, and then I show this pig boy, and things got really fucking weird. Just it happens like that sometimes with me. I apologize.
What do you? Because we had Ryan. Who was it that talked to us about objects being imbued with negative properties, like almost cursed, and like was it Ryan Bledsoe? Who did that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Like a
kind of. There was the Friday the 13th TV show. Do you guys remember that, where the whole premise was they went to go capture like these antique objects that were creepy? That was kind of, I threw this out there and it's kind of weird, but the idea that I wanted to kind of put out there is your intuition can tell you things and you should listen to it. This little thing in the antique mall, there's a retired professor from Georgia that has this antique, like this vending, place, and everyone's kind of weirded out by him. I make a documentary, so I want to talk to him about documentaries, right? And so I have a conversation with this guy, and he's kind of looking me up and down. He's got these beady little eyes, and I'm just like, is this guy really just weird, or is it just me? Is this me, my problem? And so he gives me a documentary that he made, and I watch it with my wife and my buddy, and it's this French photographer. Okay. She's dealing with some trauma. Okay. And I want to relate this to Pizzagate in a second. She's obviously dealing with some trauma, and this documentary shows her photographs, and they are fucking creepy as hell. Right. There's a flash of one particular image, and I'm like, what? I hit pause and I go back and I'm like, I want to take a picture of this image, but then I'm like, is this going to be child porn on my phone if I take this picture? Because if you have to ask yourself how young that girl is with a giant cock in her mouth, then that's a problem in my mind. Yeah. And so for me, that's confirmation that this guy, retired professor that used to have students that he would show things to, in my mind, and this is speculation, I'm not saying that he's done this, but in my mind, in terms of grooming behavior, you show a documentary like this, if one of your students identifies the image, that's a chance to kind of feel out where the boundaries might be, and to see if there's any vulnerabilities. And so you have potentially people that just are sort of under the radar in your own communities, that might just be part of things that are a little creepy.
Oh, I totally believe that.
And you got to pay attention to your intuition. My wife got us out of this Costa Rica town because she was like, something is wrong with this hostel we're staying at. And it turned out, we found out that it was a Catholic priest who had been moved around the States a bunch. And they finally found this little town in Costa Rica to hide him out. And this woman running a bed and breakfast told us the community was trying to kick him out because he was, quote unquote, teaching the kids English. and so there was just some creepy shit going on. And so I think as people kind of move forward into this new weird world that they're trying to push on us, and we might have to create a parallel world sort of to live in that's not psychotic. You really got to trust your intuition and your gut about what might be happening in your own backyard, because there's little signs out there and little signals. It's not all obvious like Astro World, Satan, sacrifice stuff, but pay attention.
Question you got to ask yourself are why are these politicians doing this? Why are they doing all this crazy shit? And that is it. I mean, are they all compromised? I mean, at a low level, are they being promised the world? I mean, what is this? And it just becomes, us versus them. And they are waging war against the middle and lower class. And they've been sold on this idea of communism, Marxism is the way to go. And that they will be taken care of when this system is implemented. But what history will show is those people get taken out as well, because the people who got them to do it don't trust them as far as they can kick them. They're the brown shirts.
My fictional story, this is a perfect kind of segue into mentioning what I'm trying to accomplish in fiction. And I kind of stopped writing this fictional story because it started coming true to a certain degree. But the pitch,
what are you, the Babylon Bee?
I guess, yeah, something like that, right? I started writing it in 2016, and the pitch that I kind of have for Missoula being a microcosm is this, okay? To the north, we have Linda Pritzker. So Linda Pritzker is part of the Pritzker family. So currently the governor of Illinois is a Pritzker. So Linda's like the black sheep, and she started the 1,000 Buddha Garden up in Arley, Montana. So we have a billionaire kind of connected up there. To the south of us, we have a biosecurity level 4 lab and a guy named Fauci. You might have heard of him.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, his mentor was just doing some work south of us.
Dracula?
Maurice Hilleman. Yeah, no, Dracula is their spirit animal. And so, Fauci has a mentor to the south of us. We have Seth Bodner is the president of the University of Montana. So he's a West Point guy, like special ops. He was GE transportation corporate guy. His wife just happened to be in telemedicine before the pandemic. His wife also just happened to be buddies with Jim Messina, who helped get Obama reelected in 2012. And then Jim Messina went across the pond to help get Brexit sort of pushed through. And so for a little mountain town with a river that runs through it, we have some actual big players that are here. And I think this might be one of the bunker locations that's being looked at as a place to sort of protect, because they've got their hideaways. I've heard that Pelosi's got land to the south of us in Hamilton, potentially. It's a very interesting situation. And I think if you watch the show Yellowstone's an amazing show. Costner's doing fantastic work showing this like Montana power dynamics, when it comes to gentrification and the res and all this stuff that's happening. It's a fascinating thing.
Well, the best way to hide is in plain sight. And, there's a reason why Bill Clinton was picked. I mean, not only was he's a Rhodes Scholar, he's playing ball. Yep. Hillary has connections to organized crime, but they got in control of Arkansas, which at the time was 50th in the States. So, I mean, nobody's paying attention to Arkansas. It's a shithole. And no disrespect to anybody in Arkansas, but at the time, that's why they used him, because nobody was paying attention to the things that Bill Clinton was doing in Arkansas. And that's why they could run coke through Arkansas, because everyone was looking at Florida. It's my whole opinion on Florida. I love the state. I love gigging there. But man, they're shouting freedom way too much. Way too much. And you got places like Tennessee, Oklahoma. They're just as free, but they're not as loud. Florida's just really loud, man. And I'm like, why is it so loud? Something's going on. And the places that aren't talking, that are super quiet, those are the ones you should keep your eye on, because something's going down. It's like when we went to Alabama with the tinfoil hat show. It's just like nobody showed up to Huntsville, because that's where the New World Order is. But nobody knew that until I got there, that Huntsville was the real home of the New World Order. Not Houston and NASA, but really in Huntsville. That's where they sent the Nazi that came and built. Yeah. So that's what happens, man. it's never the big loud one. It's the quiet one that you got to worry about, man. Hey, Travis.
Yeah.
You crushed it today. Thank you so much, man.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Should we wrap it up? Is it getting close to the end?
I got to go see the babies.
Oh, I am so happy that you get to have that joyful experience.
I love them.
The kids will challenge you in ways that you can't even conceive of yet. But it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
Ghost is already putting on theatrics. It's unbelievable to watch. She just puts on a show, and I go, and the Oscar goes to, and she'd get up and put herself in and be like, just push me, She's putting words together. I love it.
End of the day, that's the most important stuff is what's closest to you. And if that's, family, friends, I mean, that's the stuff you have to put the energy into at the end of the day. So
I love them so much. Yeah. So why don't you tell them where they can find you, brother?
So williamskink.com is my website that's been perpetually kind of under construction for years, but there's going to be some links to find some of the different things that I'm doing. So that's williamskink, skink.com. Then engensmissoula.com, ENGENSMISSOULA. Engensmissoula.com is where we're going to be putting our documentary about tax increment financing out. We're going to make it a very sexy thing to understand local tax mechanisms, because the amount of corruption that we're trying to document, it's phenomenal. So I'm really excited to have some things kind of getting out there and to do more interviews like this. I mean, you've inspired me so much, Sam. All you guys have really helped me know that I'm not as crazy as I kind of thought I was, and stay positive in moving forward, because there's a lot of work to be done.
Let me ask you how XG has influenced you. How's he influenced?
XG? Are you kidding me? Cannabis is a experience that he's trying to.
I love it. XG is the best. We love it. That was a joke.
You guys have so much fun. It really is nice that you guys keep it positive, and the folks that you're bringing together. I think you guys are like resonators of synchronicities. You are helping us gather the troops together to fight back against the sociopaths. So I love it, man. I greatly appreciate all you guys.
That means a lot to me. Thank you so much. You crushed it. I think this is important conversations. People need to understand that if they want change, they have to engage in change, and you have to pay. You got to keep your eye on the ball. And
show up in real life.
It's going to be just for the rest of your life. There's no time to take a break because they're unrelenting. Now, I'm going to end on this. And Johnny, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I think Bitcoin could easily be a government psyop, but if you're asking me, I think Bitcoin could be the beginning of the end of centralized banks, because what's going on is you have, El Salvador, like basically getting all on Bitcoin. And if this thing explodes enough, they're going to be able to pay off all their IMF debts. That means they're out of the IMF pot. The scam. And if we're going to see more and more countries doing this, it's going to be like, why are we going to need the IMF? Why are we going to need all these centralized banks? The future's bright, man. We'll see. Travis, thanks for coming on. Xavier, you inspire me every day with your bravery. Okay. Johnny, make love to farm animals, because we know that's why you go back all the time. We love you guys very much. Hopefully this will get out before Thanksgiving. We got another episode we're doing tomorrow. That'll probably come out on Friday. But have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy time with your family. That's what it's all about. And just know the Raiders are playing and they'll probably lose. So, should be tradition. Thank you guys for tuning in. We love you very much. Hope to see you in San Diego. And then in the new year, a lot of great tour dates are coming. So we love you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
Adios.
We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Tinfoil hat.